Welcome back to Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. I am your resort manager, Ross Bolen, here with concierge extraordinaire, Barrett, Dudley, and Barrett.
Yes.
The day has come.
It has.
The White Lotus Season 2 finale, the last episode. We're going to have to address things group by group. It's the only way to do this.
Came and it went.
It did.
And now here we are on a Monday looking out at a disgusting gray, rainy day. It's not cold. It's not warm either, so it's extra bone chilling. And all I can think about is that beautiful Sicily weather with, the waves lapping up on the beach and just bringing in dead bodies.
Yeah.
After dead bodies.
Great vibes. Great vibes here in Austin, Texas. Let's start with the Spillers and the Sullivans. We open the episode with Ethan laying in bed, imagining Cameron pounding out his wife right next to him.
As one does.
Yeah. So let's just start with what happens between Ethan and Harper in this episode, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, we've got Daphne FaceTiming with her trainer's kid right after that scene that opens with Ethan and his imagination running wild.
Yep.
FaceTiming with her trainer's kid, as I'm calling him, and she calls Cameron over to talk with the child through FaceTime. But Cameron is angrily flossing his teeth.
That's correct.
And does not seem to want to take part in that. Then he reluctantly puts on like his daddy enthusiasm face and does come up. What was your read here?
Yeah, this was, I thought, one of it was a very interesting scene in this final episode. I was not positive on what I was supposed to be reading into it.
I don't think any of us are.
But because, my mind has been colored with the theorizing about the kids, at the end of the day, I took it to be an acknowledgement that he knows that kid is probably not his.
That's how I took it, man.
Because I don't know what else to take from that. He's sitting there, he's flossing his teeth, he's listening to her talk to the kids, and he's stewing about something.
He's disgruntled,
He's a little bitter, and she calls him in to talk, and he has to collect himself, calm himself, and put on, like you said, that dad enthusiasm and bound into the room and talk to quote unquote his kids. And I didn't know what else to make of it except for a little bit of confirmation that something was up there, that I think you were right. And those of y'all that have been in the camp of the fact that she was saying that's my trainer's kid, not my husband's kid. This is, I think, a small maybe piece of confirmation that we got about that.
There was a lot of complaining after the episode online, particularly on Twitter and in the comment section of our Instagram posts and on TikTok, of people saying that there were too many loose ends that didn't get tied up. And I thought that was absurd because I thought, this is a perfect example, we got more loose ends tied up than I expected. Now, maybe not completely and maybe not, it's not solid proof of anything, but certainly almost a hat tip to the fact that I think the Sullivans know everything about each other. I think they're both fully on board with their setup here. And we weren't going to get a full-blown him going, well, that's not my kid, right? So this was as close as Mike White could take it without making it cheesy or stupid, in my opinion.
Yeah. We're going to obviously touch on kind of overall reaction about the shows as we go through here. But I'll take the opportunity to say that I saw mostly positive reaction about the episode. It wasn't unanimous, though.
Right.
There was certainly some disappointment with this episode as well. And it is, my take on that is it's one of the pitfalls, it's one of the drawbacks from doing a show that's puzzle boxy and theory creating and, it kind of traffics in mystery and confusion and red herrings and feigns and all of that type of stuff. Because people get so caught up in the online noise in the, what does this mean? Are we going to get an answer to this? Will they tie this loose end up? That if some of those things aren't done in a perfect, neat way, then you feel dissatisfied.
Right.
For somebody like me, who has largely spoken about how it's fun to talk about all that stuff, but it's not what I enjoy most about the show. It's not why I think the show is good. I thought that the themes of this season were brilliantly wrapped up here.
Completely agree.
I'm gonna get. I'll get to one nitpick that I maybe sort of agree with later when we get to another storyline. But with this didn't need to be answered thoroughly for me. Like,
and that's not. It's not how life works.
To paraphrase Daphne, some of the fun is in the mystery.
Exactly.
It's in the not knowing.
It's sexy sometimes,
right? Like, so,
yeah.
like I liked that they just kind of left this a little bit open-ended. What was Cameron stewing on there?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, the ambiguity of it all ended up being one of my favorite pieces of this season on the whole, right? Because I think life ends up being, and relationships end up being much more ambiguous sometimes than we want them to be. And for everybody who was like, I wanted more answers, man, I was very upset by that. I was triggered online by the need for more answers because I thought we got so many, and we can kind of move through here, and every time we hit one, I'll point it out. But this first example here, Cameron angrily flossing his teeth, not really wanting to go in and be a part of that FaceTime, was, to me, acknowledgement that not only, yes, that is not his child, it is this trainer's, but also he is aware.
Yeah, and it's we have seen some cracks in Daphne's facade, and we'll get to one of the best scenes of the episode here in a minute. But I thought this was also a good piece to have because I think it's the first time that we see a crack in Cam's facade.
Yeah, where he shows his unhappiness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. At breakfast, between the Spillers and Sullivans, Harper ends up giving herself away by calling Cameron an idiot, which was, in Ethan's mind, and he was correct, a personal attack that you would only make if you'd had some level of intimacy with someone. And it was really, really interesting to me because if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody that makes sort of a personal comment to one of your friends or something in a way that makes you go, huh, maybe you two know each other better than I thought you did.
Right.
That was sort of in that aisle.
That all makes sense to me. Like when you spell it out like that, it was funny because in the moment when she said that, I was almost like, I actually took it right there in the just, frame by frame confirmation that they didn't do anything because it felt like validation from something that I had said last week was that she doesn't like this guy. She thinks she is disgusted by him.
Hates him too much to hook up with him, right?
Yes.
That was your read, yeah.
That was kind of my read. But what you're saying and how Ethan kind of saw it makes a lot of sense is that you wouldn't have had that moment of outburst. You wouldn't have felt as comfortable spitting that out there if there hadn't been a deeper connection point.
Yeah. So back in their room, Ethan confronts Harper, and he actually ends up getting her to crack without you could tell, first of all, these two are supposedly have been together for like over 7 years-ish, right?
Okay.
Like Mike White did some interview where he gave that bit of information that they wanted this couple to seem like they'd been together 7-8 years, something in that range, right? Mm-hmm. We'd questioned on Patreon, like perhaps how long they had been married. And as a result, he's able to sort of push on her, press on her. Look, you're lying. You're not a good liar. I know when you're lying. You're still lying. And he gets her to crack to a certain extent, at least partially, right? Admitting that Cameron asked her to go back to their room. It wasn't for the hat. And when they got there, he latched the door shut and he kissed her. And that within 10 minutes, and that's an important number, Ethan was banging on the door. So Cameron escaped through the room partition, whatever the hell that thing is called,
the
right? Connecting door, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this was tense, man. Look, around this point in the episode, my anxiety really started to build because I'm thinking about everything we've seen this season. I'm thinking about the fact that we're going to get bodies. I'm thinking about the fact that these people, first of all, they gave us in the preview last week that Ethan and Cameron end up fighting in the water, which I really didn't appreciate, by the way. But in the end, I was fine with it because neither of them actually dies, right? So there was just so much going on in my head at this point that it really, to be honest with you, it's the point in the episode where things stopped being enjoyable for a while. Like, I was like, it's Sunday night. I'm so fucking stressed. This is ridiculous. My heart is racing. Like, what is going to happen between all of these people? So yeah, Ethan goes out to, well, first he busts into Cameron and Daphne's room, questioning where Cameron is. She tells him he's out taking a swim. Ethan stomps out to the beach, stomps out into the water, and straight up confronts this guy, laying out for him, like, look, there's a difference between, this isn't college, it's not some crush, this is my wife. Friends don't try to fuck each other's wives. It ends up getting violent.
Very violent.
But they fight like two 12-year-olds in a pool, where they're like holding each other underwater. It's kind of awkward, but they're also two jacked dudes like throwing down. It was just an awkward fight overall, though.
These are two brawny bull elephants, man.
Yeah,
right? They're
just going at it.
They're just out here, just boxing. They're the tusks are out. Yeah, but it was very violent. Like it was one of those situations where I was obviously very confident that neither one of these guys was going to kill the other, but they are definitely holding each other underwater in a nerve-wracking way.
Yeah, it was too. Here was the thing that made me feel better. It was too early on in the episode and there's too many witnesses for either of these men to die right here. It wouldn't add up with the Daphne being in the ocean the next day and one of their bodies floating up. So that kind of took the tension away from me a little bit. But all in all, yeah, no, I mean, he really holds Cameron underwater, and then at one point Cameron holds him underwater.
Yeah.
And there's punches thrown, and it is very intense. One of the other guests, one of the other tourists has to like stumble out there and break it up. And then Ethan does the Charlie Brown walk out of the ocean with his t-shirt on, just soaking wet and depressed and wrecked by the entire thing.
It's okay, though, because he's obviously, all the clothes that he's wearing, they're just all super quick dry.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, just very quick dry clothing.
One of the few oversights in the entire season, when he's walking down the beach later and he runs into Daphne, and yet somehow his hair and t-shirt, which was completely soaked as he was held underwater, is already dry.
Completely dry.
Must have been going on a walk for a few hours there.
Yeah, at
in
least.
That Sicilian sun.
Like I said, quick drying clothing.
I knew none of these rich fuckers would die. So disappointed personally in Harper for giving Cameron even a little bit of what he wanted. And this is one of the first, like, you could call it a disappointment of the episode for me, where we will never know how far they actually went together, right? Ethan's questioning her. He's like, did he take his dong out? Did you give him a blowjob? Even if he didn't fuck you, like, what happened? And she doesn't really confirm or deny the extent to which that went, right? I think her throwing out the 10-minute thing, or him, whoever throws it out, he says, like, it was 10 minutes before I got there.
Right. A lot of unaccounted time.
Right.
Unaccounted for time.
Really makes it even more questionable in terms of what exactly went down between Cameron and Harper. And again, that's the way Mike White wanted it. If you wanted an answer, another hashtag answer here, you were never going to get it. Never.
Well, once again, the mystery about all of this is what keeps these two relationships moving.
It is.
And that's part of why we don't get an answer here. It was an interesting thing to try to parse, because I thought that she was telling the truth when Ethan was, slamming his head against the wall, demanding that she was lying.
Right.
But he clearly knew her as well as he thought he did.
He was correct, man. And Credit to him for the read.
And he eventually breaks through to her and gets her to leak a little bit of the information. He still thinks she's lying about something. So it's like, it's does he still really, really know her? Does he still actually know that she's hiding something? Or is he now just pressing for something that's not there because he can't actually...
Because he's spiraling?
Yeah, because he's spiraling and he can't deal with the unaccounted for time or the exact retelling, second for second of what went down. I think that if anything beyond kissing happened, probably wasn't much,
Probably pretty accurate and on par with his imagination.
Kind of on the table.
In episode 6 when he sees him on the table. Yeah, of course.
That type of thing. But they were able to cover it up too quickly.
For it to be full-blown sex in your mind?
For there to be full-blown intercourse happening.
I agree with that. Yeah. I agree. I do think it's a fine line he walks, in that Mike White, the writer, creator, director of the show, that intuition you have when you know your person is full of shit. It's painful to deal with that. It's really, really, really hard to deal with knowing that they're lying to you and knowing that you may never know, just like we never know. And that's the thing about it. It mirrored the experience of being in that situation. If you're a viewer of this show, that uncertainty is what you end up walking away with, right? Because once somebody has lied to you, even if they start to admit the truth or give you a part of it, you're still going to doubt that, because once they've lied, why wouldn't they continue to lie? Why wouldn't they just, you know what I mean? So it's like brutal to watch. But yeah, so Ethan goes down the inexplicably dry walk on the beach. He runs into Daphne, and he kind of pussyfoots around the situation with her, which I thought was really interesting. He's like, I think something may have happened. And she's like, with what? And he's like, Cameron and Harper.
Yeah.
And her reaction, Daphne's facial acting, everything about this scene, one of my favorites in the whole season.
I think it might have been my favorite scene, maybe of the entire season. It's certainly of this episode. It was incredible. We talked about that glint in her eye over the course of the season.
Yeah.
And then this is just like the pinnacle of that. It's all right there. I feel like, I don't know how they cast this, but I feel like it was just like a close-up of people's eyes, probably reading this scene to see what they could do with it, because you get the entire course of the emotion that she feels when he kind of sort of says what he's thinking happened. And I 100% understood where he was coming from, because it's that decision that you're making, right? Well, my life's pretty shitty right now because of information that I have. Do I put that on somebody else? And it's almost like you kind of feel selfish in doing it, because sure, maybe you're being honest, maybe you're sharing a truth, maybe you're giving somebody information that they should have, but you're also kind of like unburdening yourself with it.
Right.
You're kind of making somebody else have to deal with it as well.
Misery loves company.
Yeah. And so it is.
And potentially destroying another relationship, right?
And so it's definitely a moment where you're kind of torn on what to do. And so he spits it out as best as he can. And like, you just, the way that you got the pain from Daphne,
The disappointment. And then in a matter of, 3-4 seconds, she just pushes it down. And goes right back to her spiel.
And just flips the switch onto why this is okay. And how to make peace with it. And how you make peace with it and how you have to deal with it. I thought was absolutely incredible. And then just one of my favorite like pieces that you were left to chew on from this episode is what she says about how when you're with a partner, and this goes for all the people that you interact with, friends, coworkers, whatever it might be, but a partner is somebody that you're with lots all the time, right? And it's such an interesting truth that you don't actually know what is in that person's head ever.
Right. You don't know everything.
And you definitely don't know everything. And maybe there are moments and places in time where you can say, I know what you're thinking about. Or maybe there are those moments where you're like Ethan, like you know that they're lying about something or they're hiding information or whatever. But like just on a general day-to-day, just like eating dinner, sitting on the couch, like whatever, like you don't know what that person is thinking about. You don't know what they have in their mind.
Right.
And then you flip that on yourself and you're like, yeah, there's definitely things that I think that are just like super off the wall and weird or random or uncomfortable.
Or awful.
Or awful that I certainly never, ever put out loud.
That you don't share, yeah.
You never share. And it's like everybody has those moments. And
it's something you have to come to terms with in a relationship, especially a long-term one, especially a marriage. Like it's beautifully put by her. And that shot of Megan Fahey, whatever, where her face is occupying the entire screen was stunning.
Yeah.
That was a stunning piece of cinematography right there. I mean, it was so moving in the way, like you said, that glint in her eye and the way she goes right back. First of all, to touch on the disappointment, she's disappointed, not necessarily in Cameron, right? So much as I think Harper. This is a woman that she already told earlier in the season, look, I have a hard time like trusting girlfriends, right? Mm-hmm. That they're always trying to stab me in the back or use information against me or whatever. And after all she shared with her and all the personal details that came out in Noto on edibles, in the end, she fell for it too. She fell for Cameron's seduction, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also possible that the reason that she can't really maintain any girlfriends is because Cameron keeps trying to fuck all of them.
It could be very possible. I mean, I think after what we've seen in this season, it's entirely possible.
But the way that she frames like that general mystery about your partner's mind is essentially like the justification for why mystery is okay, for why we don't need to know everything that goes on, for why essentially all is like justification for why Cam occasionally like stepping out and creeping on her is something that she can live with. Is it's a pretty like kind of it's a sad leap to make.
It is,
honestly.
It is.
And then we move on to our next mystery here.
And it doesn't make like, yes. So she tells Ethan, Daphne does, hey, have you been over to Isola Bella over there yet? It's so beautiful.
The island, the little island.
Yeah, come walk with me. And at first he's kind of taken aback, like, what is happening here? And I was like, holy shit, she's going to kill him. But because the whole story with that island and the woman from earlier that Quentin shares with Tanya, I was like, they're going to climb to the top and she's going to throw him off. But then I was like, that's silly. Yeah, she's going to bang him.
One of the great things that this episode did is the whole thing really read like it operated as a thriller. This episode did.
Yeah.
And the first 30 minutes of the episode reminds you that everybody has a motive to potentially want to do something nasty to another person. And so for a while, I was thinking that she might kill Harper.
Right.
That like you said, that disappointment in Harper could lead to some antics, and then maybe, off in the dead of night, and then she's sitting there, oh my God, she finds the body. What a coincidence.
Right.
And so it really makes your mind turn those gears and work through all the scenarios, which is obviously intentional by Mike White, but really fun here. But so yeah, every moment from essentially this point on, you're like,
what is happening?
Is it happening now?
Yeah.
Is it happening now? But yeah, so what do you think happened as she leads Ethan off to the private island?
Isola Bella. It's 100%, no doubt, absolutely 0.0 doubt in my mind that they had, maybe they didn't have sex, maybe she just gave him a blowjob, but some type of sexual favor was exchanged there, and look, she just gave him the same speech she gave to Harper, that you have to find a way to not be a victim of life.
Right.
And to even the playing field, to take the power back for both of them, the only move here is for them to hook up, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that she doesn't kill him, to me, makes it no doubt. And for anybody that has doubts about that, I would love for you to explain it to me. Like, what do you think? They went out there and had tea or prayed together? No, they went out there and had sex. And he stops, I think, on the walk when he realizes, oh, she's
seducing me. Yeah.
And she gives him that look back over her shoulder. That's the confirmation for me. Like, she's like, come on, let's go do this. It'll make you feel better. And then from another angle, Daphne's also preventing this entire thing from escalating even further and blowing up in their faces, because now they both have their own secret. Right. And it evens the whole playing field between the Sullivans and the Spillers, and it keeps this thing, even keel enough to where they can have that final dinner, the most awkward dinner of all time, later in the episode. But yeah, it was something I thought through a lot, from having the initial reaction of like, oh my God, is she going to kill him? To then being like, well, then they would have to climb to the top. I really think this little lady is going to climb to the top of this thing with him and then throw his ass off. Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. If you go back and rewatch it, which I did very briefly, quickly, before we started recording, is no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I certainly read it as a hookup. How far it went, who's to say, but definitely something, like you said, to give them a little secret too, to make them feel a little bit better. We have that awkward dinner. It all leads to the big sex moment finally for Ethan and Harper.
Yeah.
And I found it fascinating that they were essentially turned by Cam and Daphne.
They needed a little bit of the Sullivans in them.
They did, and they were kind of
literally
sucked into that to that style of relationship where the cheating, the mystery, the jealousy, it is the aphrodisiac, right? Like, it is what kind of like keeps the sexual engine humming, the desire going. And it's like it really made me think, because, and then Mike White kind of addresses this at the in the Inside the Episode afterwards too. But it's like, yeah, it works for the time being, and maybe if you play with a little bit of that fire, it can be healthy for a relationship.
It can serve as a spark, right?
But certainly for Cam and Daphne, with the look in her eye, the hoops that she has to make herself jump through.
Yeah.
You have to think that catches up with them at the very least.
And that's one of the things I took away from this too, is like, look, just because some of the strategies that are laid out throughout the course of this season, as far as relationships and sex go, just because they do work temporarily, certainly doesn't mean that they're healthy.
Right.
Certainly doesn't mean that they should be your first option, right? But it just, this is the way some relationships operate. It is a thing that happens with some people.
And I had to wonder about Mike White's messaging here too, right? Because when Ethan and Harper do get back from the most awkward dinner of all time, they start fooling around. They knock the head off.
Yes,
and it smashes.
the statue.
And so you have to read that as metaphorical. And what was that? That was the head of the guy that cheated on his wife, right? And then she cuts his head off and kills him, and as retribution, as jealous payback, right?
It's the thing that made us think all these dudes were going to die this season.
Yeah. But the smashing of that idea, right, is that in fact the cheating here did the opposite.
Brought them together.
It brought them together. Nobody's getting their head cut off for their dalliances.
All right.
And so I just thought that was like an I wondered kind of what Mike White was trying to say with that.
It's a twisted angle for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cameron ends up paying Lucia what he owes, by the way, which the Sullivan's potential financial troubles that we and so many people speculated on never came up again, right? The whole purpose for the trip, Ethan ends up deciding that it's because this guy wanted to bang his wife more so than he wanted to get him into business, right? It's one of those ambiguous pieces of the puzzle here that goes sort of unaddressed in the end.
Yeah, and we were claiming all throughout the season that things had to be red herrings,
right?
And there had to be some.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think this.
We had to maintain some of that, like I think that. Because of the way that one of these other storylines plays out, I think some of these others had to be kind of like, look over here, look over here, look over here, what's happening here, and stuff that just kind of like didn't really amount to anything. And that's great. That's totally fine. We didn't need every one of these threads that we were chasing down to like pan out in a way that, that was salacious.
I also saw people using Cameron paying Lucia as evidence that they in fact have no financial troubles, and I think that's absolutely silly. You're going too far the other way where, what was it, $1,200, $1,400 or something, euros? This was not some make or break amount of money, especially if you're talking about wealth and big financial ballers or whatever. Like it didn't confirm or deny to me that the Sullivans do have financial trouble. And I think there's still enough evidence from earlier in the season to point to there being some kind of issue there with Daphne saying, sometimes I spend a lot of money late at night. And Cameron says, like, all of the money. Like, I still think there was something there. It just didn't have to be one of the focal points in the final, episode and message of the whole season.
Yeah.
So yeah, they end up having this insanely awkward dinner together, one last dinner, and I almost had one last panic attack during it. And then back in their room, Harper asks Ethan, what's going to happen to us? And she's clearly, like, after everything that's happened, she's kind of broken in that moment. Like, this has all gone too far, sort of, I can't believe how this all unfolded. And without a word, he turns to her, and finally, they have... He makes sexy time with his wife. After all of her advances that he shut down throughout the course of the season, they finally get it on during the foreplay, of which they shatter that statue head. And I think you put it perfectly. It was a great metaphor for sort of breaking the mold that they had set in that first episode with all that storytelling about the statue heads. And the spark for these two has somehow, on some level, been reignited.
Yeah.
Through the salaciousness, through the lying, through the cheating. And that is absolutely a confusing message.
Yes.
from creator, director, writer Mike White. Today's episode is brought to you by NordVPN. NordVPN here to drastically enhance your web browsing experience and data security. No one likes to be watched or tracked, even if they have nothing to hide. That's why it's important you step up your privacy game whenever possible. If you aren't using a VPN right now, you're currently open to having your internet data creeped on in a big way. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It's a service that protects your internet connection and privacy online and creates an encrypted tunnel for your data, protects your online identity by hiding your IP address, and allows you to use use public Wi-Fi hotspots safely, and more. VPNs are the only way to be sure your real location and IP address are hidden, your online data is encrypted, and your browsing history is invisible to your internet service provider and other third parties. Everybody who cares about their privacy should be using a VPN right now, and NordVPN is the best and fastest VPN provider in the business. NordVPN is software, not hardware, super easy to use across every major platform, whether you're on Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, or what have you. Even your Android TV supports NordVPN. You can connect with just one click or enable auto connect for zero-click protection. I personally love NordVPN because if you travel abroad, finally get that vacation in, you can make sure you still have access to your favorite shows and movies from your home country on location-based streamers like Netflix using NordVPN. And because at this point, obviously, I think it's important that we all take our own steps to protect our online privacy. Grab your exclusive OCC NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/OCC to get a huge discount on your NordVPN plan, plus free threat protection, plus 4 months for free. This deal is completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose except a sense of insecurity. There's a link for the deal in the description of this episode. Thank you to NordVPN for supporting the Clam Fam all season long for the White Lotus Season 2 and for supporting our online security. Again, NORD, nordvpn.com/OCC, code OCC. So, to move on to the Degrasso family, and we can touch on the Sullivans and Spillers a little bit later on just for a moment as well, but Alby wakes up next to Lucia at the beginning of the episode and tells her he's going to help her, and that maybe she can come to L.A. It was everything we feared, basically, with Alby. And we flash over to Dominic's room where he's staring at photos of his wife and daughter on his phone, and it is not Laura Dern.
That's correct. A voice cameo only.
You were correct there, Barrett.
Yep.
Even though Laura Dern was the voice of his wife on the phone, not the person we see in the photos. He cries while looking at his family photos, and it really does seem like Dominic, flaws and all, he wants to be a better man. He wants his family to be whole again, regardless of how too little too late it may feel to all of us in the audience, right?
Yeah.
And then at breakfast, Alby asks his dad, Dominic, for 50,000 euros and basically blackmails his own dad into giving it to him, saying in exchange he will put in a good word with his mother, Dominic's wife. I would just note, Alby met Lucia 3 days ago, and remember, Dominic had sex with her first. So this is like, he says to his dad, think of it as karmic payment for all the shit you've done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the worst father-son relationship in recent memory on television, these two. It's just ridiculous.
We certainly get an illuminating look into the finances of the Degrassos, since 50,000 euros is literally nothing to either of them.
Not a big deal at all.
Not a big deal.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a kind of an interesting wrinkle.
He tries to negotiate it down to 10,000 euros.
Not that we didn't know that everybody on this show was fabulously wealthy, but yeah, it was just kind of a shocking number to just toss around willy-nilly like that. I thought it was. Yeah, I'm still after the episode. Alby was one of the kind of the things that Laura and I were kind of talking about, kind of questioning, just what's the deal with Alby? What were we saying about Alby? It wasn't a great sign that he was willing to potentially put his mom back in harm's way.
Just to get what he wanted.
Right? And
he was a manipulative little shit in the end.
He's got the smirk on his face when he kind of lays out all the things that he'll tell his mom. And the way that he's saying it all makes it sound like he knows he's going to be telling a lie.
Right.
And so it was just kind of fucked up, like
super fucked up.
And it speaks to just kind of I think the way that Alby was falling into the same mistakes of both his dad and his grandfather. It's not necessarily the cheating, it's not necessarily the womanizing, but just the fact that he is distracted and beholden to sex, essentially.
Right. Which was a big theme of this entire season, right?
And that kind of became my takeaway with Alby, is that this guy essentially he's just thinking with the pee-pee, man.
Yeah, the wrong head.
The wrong head. Lucci's got 3 days with this beautiful Italian girl and wants to give her 50,000 euro without really a second thought about it.
Well, and all as this under
And then
the guise of him being the White Knight, right?
Yeah. And then in exchange is kind of willing to potentially throw his mom under the bus.
Which is, it's insane. It's an insane move. I thought that the last shot we get of the Degrassos waiting in line at the airport when the beautiful Italian woman walks by and all three of their heads whip around was the confirmation of like, look, this generational shit, it doesn't change. Right? These guys are all scumbags. None of them learned anything on this trip in the end. And it's almost like the pointing to the fight against your instincts, right?
Right.
If you inherit what Alby has inherited from Dominic, who has inherited from Bert, you better do something about it, right? Or else you're just going to end up in the same situation over and over. But back to their conversation, Dominic says, like, questions how Alby will make it through life if he's this big of a mark.
Yeah.
And Alby's like, I'm not a mark. I'm not a mark. He can't come to terms with it until she literally walks out of the room, right? And abandons him once and for all.
Yeah.
And then it becomes so clear that he should literally change his name legally to Mark because 3 days, $50K. And I don't care how wealthy Dominic is. This was an expensive trip, man, for this guy. He took some hits. He funded Lucia and Mia's entire stay at the White Lotus.
Week-long stay at the White Lotus.
He drops 50,000 euros on his son for nothing, literally nothing.
A karmic payment.
That's 25 nights of advance payments, by the way, according to her 2,000 euro plan, which he's not getting to cash in on here. Just absolutely wild to see how much money Dominic spent. And to your point, shows us exactly how wealthy he is. He doesn't even care. He's completely unfazed. Remember earlier in the season, we're like, how is he still letting this chick charge drinks and food and clothing to the room? What the hell?
Yeah.
Well, it's because he's so rich that this is
nothing.
It's funny money, right? It's like the Wolf of Wall Street guy throwing money off the yacht at the FBI agents. He doesn't care. These are fun coupons. Bert, by the way, at that breakfast says that he had a dream that they went to visit their relatives and they turned out to be a bunch of banshees that chased them out of town. And I couldn't even tell if that was like further acknowledgement that he's dealing with some level of dementia, which it may have been, or that he was sort of making a joke to his son and his grandson.
I read it as a joke.
Right?
Like essentially like, wow, what a shit show, crazy ass day that was, had to have been a dream.
Yeah. Like let's never talk about it again, right?
Yes,
Right? That the whole purpose of this trip ended up being a total and utter failure. Like this is why the Degrasso family came to Italy. And no, I loved that line from Bert. It was great.
Bert also, just to tie his sexuality into it as well, has to let everybody know that in his goodbye with Mia, he was aroused. He popped a bit of a boner there.
He had a chub, an old man chub
from a hug.
From a simple hug in public
with Mia.
Has to share that with his kids because that's totally normal and healthy behavior for a grandpa. He also drops the brilliant line, "Our Achilles heel is our Achilles cock."
It's our Achilles cock.
Right?
That's right.
Very relatable for most men, I would argue. But later at dinner, Dominic tells Alby that he wired him the money. Lucia ends up bailing on Alby, obviously, and Dominic calls his wife, and she seems open to patching things up because when he tells him, "Hey, Alby, I've wired the money, and you can, it's not why I did it,
right?
100% why he did it. It's not why I did it, but if you could put in that good word with your mother," and Alby's like, "I already did."
Yeah. But potentially backing off the transactional kind of shitty thing that they've got going here.
Right.
Like Alby, regardless of whether the money was going to come or not,
has
decided maybe that his dad is actually trying to change or has seen something in himself whereas like, maybe my dad is doing the best he can with what he's got with these types of unchecked desires or whatever, but it I think it almost was to make both of them feel a little less gross about it, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was effective. But yeah, I will note, we never find out. We questioned the whole season. What did Dominic do? What did he do to upset his wife enough for her to make that, her response on the phone in episode 1?
Yeah. Man, I didn't even think about that.
Because it didn't matter.
It didn't really matter.
And that was the point of so many of the untied loose ends for me, and the ambiguity of it all was it isn't necessarily about exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Right? It's about what you think and what you read into it.
At the end of the day, I think that we can surmise that what Dominic did is have sex with everything that walked.
Yes.
Like
pretty easy.
He is we saw that scene in the bar after he says he's going to change, where he just like can't take his eyes off of any of the attractive women in there.
Every woman in the bar. Yeah.
The big, swinging of the head at the hot Italian girl in the airport.
Yeah.
Like this guy has an issue with, like I said, checking these desires.
He even told Lucia point blank, I've got a problem with sexual addiction. I'm trying to get better, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you and I mean, me in particular, I really wanted it to be some bigger, crazier storyline.
Right.
And now in hindsight, that was never going to happen. We were never going to get that. So yeah, I think where you landed is exactly where I landed too. It's like, he's a horn dog.
He's a horn dog, a major horn dog.
Unable to have self-control.
And as South Park taught us, a horn dog with a gigantic amount of money, which is kind of a recipe for
disaster.
Yeah.
Very quickly, before we get to our Tanya storyline, as I've said a few times recently, the two main ways for you to support our show are to support our sponsors by using the dedicated codes and URLs we provide during our commercials or ad reads in the middle of our podcast, and directly pledge your support for our podcast on Patreon. You simply go to patreon.com/oystersclamscockles, pick either the Crustacean Nation tier to gain audio access to our premium pods, or the Mollusk Militia tier if you'd like to watch our show in full video and have the ability to call into our hotline for the chance to be featured on the show yourself. When you sign up, you will immediately gain access to our entire collection of bonus coverage of the White Lotus, but also 86 podcast episodes that Barrett and I recorded discussing every single episode of HBO's classic crime drama, The Sopranos, friendly to first-timers and rewatchers alike. Easily one of my favorite things I've done in my career. Thoroughly enjoyed watching The Sopranos with Barrett. It was his first time. I've seen it like 7 or 8 times now, and we did a podcast for every single episode. They operate in a spoiler-free manner, so if you've never seen The Sopranos, it's safe for you to go in there and start with episode 1. Episode 1 is actually free at the top of patreon.com/oystersclamscockles, so you can check it out. Get the whole Sopranos pod, but that's not all. When you sign up today, you also gain access to our premium ad-free House of the Dragon Season 1 bonus coverage as well, driven by hotline calls from the Mollusk Militia, and it's a blast. So you get the White Lotus bonus coverage, our entire Sopranos companion podcast, and House of the Dragon bonus coverage, all for a minimum of just $5 a month. Thank you to everyone in the Crustacean Nation and Mollusk Militia for ensuring we can continue to do our podcast. It means the world. Go today to patreon.com/oystersclamscockles. Quickly, Valentina. Her night with Mia, a smashing success, but she can't find her panties in the morning. And Mia ends up being one of my favorite characters in the season because she's really the only one with like a heart of gold. Like, you know what I mean? Where she's not, none of what she does is really, well, other than, accidentally give Giuseppe the shithead pianist the wrong drugs. But even that, you could argue like this guy was such a piece of trash. He was essentially trying to exploit her for sex in exchange for helping her get a job, which is not morally sound behavior.
Yeah.
Right. But so she helped
then
this.
Also, she does this with
Valentina?
Valentina, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, she gets a job out of it. Right? Yeah.
She exploits Valentina for a job as well.
But she also helps this like middle-aged gay woman come out of her shell and embrace her true self.
Yeah,
right?
I think that I think we feel better about the merits of the transaction between these two
compared to the other transactions that occur. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, where it feels slightly more consensual and beneficial for both sides.
A win-win,
if
you will.
Thing.
Yeah, way less so than with the Sullivans or way more so than with the Sullivans and the Spillers, I would argue, or with the Degrasso guys. So Valentina ends up moving Rocco back to the front desk and banishes Salvatore back to the beach. And then Giuseppe shows back up and is furious that Mia has replaced him entirely at the piano. I will note a little bit of foreboding for Mia when he says, like, this is not the end of this.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's not great. But again, we'll never know.
Salvatore, also just like one of the low-key underrated characters on the show. Like
his voice.
The voice was so good.
He's like frog croaky. Yeah, his voice was incredible.
And I loved their little exchange when he's like, today it's the beach and back at the day and then where tomorrow? And she's like, cleaning the dishes. Go.
Yeah, he was great comedic relief. Comic relief.
That was just really, really good. It was nice to see Valentina find just a little bit, like not like an entirely new lease on life, but like be shown kind of the way to explore her sexuality and like maybe find a little bit of happiness in something that she hadn't really explored very, very, much in her entire life. And so
she gets some fun injected in, right?
Yeah.
And the bitter Valentina we met at the beginning of the season who can't handle Rocco and what's her name? Isabella liking each other.
Right.
She ends up being completely okay with them in the end. The Rocco's back at the front desk. They're still doing their flirting. And she goes and says, Rocco. And you think she's going to do the classic thing where she rips into him. And then she's like, it's good to have you back.
Yeah.
So that was a nice, warm ending for Valentina's storyline. Not so much Giuseppe, I guess, because he gets fired and Mia gets the job full time. Great for Mia, though.
Yeah,
so,
it was decided completely on meritocracy, though, which we kind of had to agree with. People liked Mia better.
She was better.
She was the better piano
singer
player.
and pianist. Yeah. So Porsha wakes up next to Jack but can't find her phone because he so very obviously stole it. I'll just say this up front. I cannot believe Porsha survived this mess. She ended up being way more like Tanya than she wanted to acknowledge, like so naive and just blatantly idiotic at multiple points in the last couple episodes, but especially this one where, like, just as an example, he gets out of the car, Jack does, to like rip a heater. And I'm going, get in the driver's seat and take off, lady. Like, you've been kidnapped, essentially. You're aware you've been abducted at this point, and you're going to get out and have a fucking peaceful conversation with this guy? Like, there was just multiple moments where I was like, when they're still in public and she realizes her phone is gone and she takes his phone to call Tanya and warn her, basically, run!
Yeah, like go much further away.
Steal his phone and get the hell out of Dodge. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Blew my mind, but we don't end up getting any real answers about Jack. This is another piece of the ambiguity, right? Like, she calls him out like, what, so you fuck your uncle? And he's like, all right, well, I was going to take you to see the city, but you know what? Now we're just going to go ahead and roll out. I'll take you back to Terramina. And he doesn't, right? Takes her somewhere near the airport and just drops her ass off.
Yeah.
But I think he spared her life, it would seem. I don't know exactly what the plan was, obviously.
Yeah, we don't know whether
he was supposed to kill her
whether he was supposed
or
to kill
deliver her to
or
someone to be killed.
Not. Right.
But Porsha certainly serves as a loose end in the whole Quentin and Greg and the gays plan.
Well, and
the mafia guy.
And we can think, like, just think if we think it through and we think about all that's happened, like, if Quentin's plan is executed, no pun intended, perfectly, then yes, then Porsha would be a witness essentially to some of the things that had happened. She would have some knowledge. She has that phone conversation with Tanya. She knows something about Jack. Like she's got all these little pieces to start putting this puzzle together.
So dangerous to leave her in the wind.
So it's definitely dangerous to leave her in the wind, which could indicate that Jack does, kind of violate his own orders, and when he tells her to just like, and that's why he brings her to the airport is to like, you get on a plane, get out of here. And never mention this again.
And he seems to drop her in a location that's her only option is to walk straight to the airport. Right. So he can go back and report like, yeah, no, I whacked her. She's totally dead, right? And not be in danger himself. But it was interesting that Jack, who is a very murky character, he ends up making this what seems like a good decision, sparing her based on, I think, all of the fun he had with her. And he even says, like, you're really smart. Much smarter than me. And in my head, I'm going, she's not that fucking smart. But he seemed to have a level of respect for her, right? And the shared experience that they had together ends up being the reason I think he lets her go instead of doing whatever option 2 was. So, I'm not going to say good on Jack necessarily, cowabunga neck tattoo aside. He was a pretty shitty dude. But he couldn't have made it more obvious what was occurring here. And she was just like, much like Tanya on the boat, really failing to pick up the pieces and see the big picture of this scam and this fraud that was occurring. So to jump to Tanya, she wakes up in the palazzo and she catches the gays whispering with each other over breakfast. And Matteo, the Einstein-looking gay, he can't bring himself, clearly in hindsight, he can't bring himself to be a part of Tanya's would-be assassination, right?
Yeah.
So he's upset. There's the whispering. She ends up going to the cocaine room to analyze the photograph of Quentin and Greg again, which she apparently thought was all a dream. and Quentin catches her. At this point, Barrett, I was thinking maybe Tanya had picked up more than she was letting on, and that she was going to like outplay the gays and survive the season. But alas, that was not what fate had in the cards for her.
Yeah.
And I was just rooting for that, right? Because a piece of me, even you and I discussed this on Patreon last week.
Right.
Like, does it even make sense to have Tanya go into season 3, or does it make the show stale?
Right.
And in the end, Mike White's decision was obvious, right? Yep. And let's just get into what happens. She still doesn't get it, holding up the photo. It's so obviously Greg, and Quentin tells her it's a man named Steve who worked on a dude ranch that he used to go fly fishing and drop acid with and hasn't spoken to in decades. Why would you have a photo of somebody on your bedside table that you haven't spoken to in decades? But Tanya's a moron, and that's the important thing to remember as you watch this final, Tanya episode unfold. She's an idiot. She was always an idiot, right? She's supposed to be this disconnected from reality, naive moron of an heiress that is sort of speaking to the general lack of connection to reality that many wealthy people have, right? People that are born into money and they never really know what it's like to be a regular person, if you will.
Yeah, and as Mike White says in the inside the episode, for him, what this second season was kind of all about was sex. Another way to look at that, and one of the things that I think I said, just while watching the show, even on a pause break before we got to that point, was that it felt like the season was a lot about desire. So it was just all about the things that we want, or that we're dissatisfied with, or that we want more of, or that we, it's just and sex is obviously a gigantic piece of that, because it's kind of the instinct that drives us all, right?
Sure.
And so I think about that line that where Tanya is kind of telling Porsha to not be like her,
right?
To like smarten up, get your shit together. And she says that like all she's ever wanted, like all she was kind of taught to do is be like this pretty doll dressed up and put on the shelf and like waiting for people to like take her down and play with her.
Right.
And so that to me is one of the reasons why you're right. She is very naive. She is not the sharpest tool in the shed, but she's getting that from these guys. They are taking her off the shelf and putting her on a pedestal and playing with her and dressing her up and making her feel good and like giving her all these things that she wants. And I think that's definitely like obscuring her ability to see things clearly.
Absolutely.
And why she's not able to kind of like connect all the dots until it's too late and until Porsha, makes that last ditch phone call to her.
So back on the yacht, Tanya starts to become suspicious of what's unfolding when Porsha calls her from Jack's phone, and she ends up telling Porsha, look, Jack and Quentin, I caught them banging, having sex.
Great line exchange here when she finally gets to what they were actually doing.
And then she figures out, oh my God, the prenup. Greg insisted we come to Sicily so that he would have an alibi. If we get a divorce, he basically gets nothing. But if I die, and it all starts to unravel. She's like, they dock too far from the shore for her to be able to make it to the shore herself. Quentin tells Tanya that Niccolo, the mafia man, her paramour, as he puts it, is arriving this evening to escort her personally to the shore on his dinghy, right? At this point, she knows she's toast if she doesn't do something. So she like scurries up the front end of the boat, the side of the boat. And, if you've ever been on one of these giant boats, it really is a perilous walk. It's like you've got like a foot wide on the side of these yachts to make your way to the front. And she ends up dropping her goddamn cell phone off the side of the boat into the water. And at this point, I'm like, oh, she's absolutely going to die. And I started to get really sad inside. And then she goes full Godfather Part 1. All right. If you remember in Godfather Part 1, when Michael goes to the bathroom, that is where the gun is planted. All right. I immediately made this tie in my head and felt like a genius. And I know it was not very subtle, but it was still one that made me proud. I was like, the Godfather. She's Godfathering. Because she's like, I need to use the powder room. And she's been staring at that bag on and off for several minutes. She runs by, grabs the bag, locks herself in the master chamber, starts rifling through it, where she finds duct tape, trash bags, rope, and the pistol.
Yeah.
Which, confirmation, right?
Yes.
He was going to kill her, right?
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say. It's another piece, though, where we never actually get an answer.
Open-ended. Because we talked so much about like the blackmail scenario and filming her and Nicolo, and maybe they were just going to say, look, you either give us this money or we're going to use this against you in divorce court or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think that bag, my wife and I went back and forth on this for like 20 minutes after the show ended because I was like, we don't even know that he was going to kill her. And she was like, what the hell was he going to do with the trash bags? And I'm like, what do you think he was going to do? Cut her up? She's like, I don't know. Maybe he was going to Dexter the boat out. Like, I'm like, wait, wouldn't he have had to do that before? Anyway, obviously it was left open-ended on purpose, but I think there's no doubt Quentin was look, the guy's in the mafia.
Yeah,
he's gonna kill her.
Continue walking through the scene, and then we can tease it all out.
So she goes to the powder room. I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching on YouTube, and grabs the bag with the gun. She gets back into the master chambers, and I guess let me bounce back for a second. She talks to the captain first. She's like, I got to do something. Drops one of the best lines of the season. These gays, they're trying to murder me. And then he ends up being like, I'm gay.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, God, all of the gays have conspired against me. That's when she decides to make a run for the bag. She takes it into the master bedroom. She pulls out the trash bags, the rope, the duct tape, the gun, and she starts to like melt down emotionally as Nicolo and Quentin are clearly banging on the door trying to get in. But the second she like pulls the pistol up in front of her face, I'm going, yes, she's going to do it. And at this point, I think she's going to survive. I think she's going to kill all these dudes. They're going to be the bodies in the water that Daphne ends up discovering, and Tanya's going to make it to season 3. So I'm elated. Once they kick in the door and she starts popping off shots, one of the best moments of my whole life, Barrett. I'm freaking out at this point, and I love the way it was shot.
It was,
you don't see the bodies dropping.
No.
You don't see the shots hitting their mark. It's just her face and Jennifer Coolidge delivering one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. If she won the Emmy for season 1, what are they going to do with this? What, are they going to give her every Emmy at the whole award show?
Her ability and obviously through the writing and direction as well, but to also make this such a comedic moment was really, really funny. It's very Coen Brothers like.
Yes,
right. Like super
dude.
kind of just a black comedy moment here where like that decision, right, to not see the bodies dropping and to only be focusing on her melting down face while she is holding this giant pistol and just
kind of aimlessly
popping off shots, is pretty funny and reminded me of some of that stuff.
But she kills Nicolo, dead. Quentin, or the French gay, is dead.
Yeah.
Quentin is laying there like bleeding out, she ends up going, is Greg having an affair? Tell me, I know you know. It was just another dark comedy moment from her where even then, she hasn't put all the pieces together. She doesn't get it. This guy and your husband are in cahoots.
Yeah.
She dies not really getting it, which is just so Tanya. And so he tries to open his mouth, Quentin does, and blood just comes out. She doesn't get an answer there. Then Hugo, the other gay, he escapes by jumping overboard. And I think it's safe to assume he is one of the bodies found in the water because there's 3 bodies found in the water.
Yeah.
He drowns, we have to assume.
Yeah.
The captain scampers off the top of the boat and jumps into the water, probably dead too.
Yeah.
And she ends up and this is where it turned for me. She takes one look down at the dinghy that Nicolo pulled up on, and I go, oh, God damn it, she is going to die. So I went from like elated that she's killed all these dudes. I'm like sitting there yelling, kill them all. And then she looks down at the dinghy, and it immediately occurred to me, oh, he's not taking her with him to season 3, Mike White. He's leaving her here. And it was the most perfect, as Mike White put it, derpy death.
Derpy death was the perfect way to put this.
For Tanya. Yeah. It was just unbelievable. When she looks down and she goes, you've got this. And like if you watch it with subtitles, as I did when I rewatched, it says like grunts. She's grunting as she's trying to like put one leg over the side of the boat. By the way, could have just gone down to the very back and bottom and swum over to the dinghy.
Yeah.
What an idiot.
This was, I think when it's all said and done, pretty perfect for how Tanya would go out. But if she's worth $500 million, as it's been stated, one, she would have been on a yacht before.
She would know.
Surely she would know that the way Nicolo got on the fucking yacht is through the back of the yacht.
Come on.
You just walk down the stairs and there's a big deck on the back, and then you can hop over to the dinghy or get in the water if you have to.
Swim over there.
Swim over.
It's 5 feet, lady. What are you doing?
To think that you got to drop down into the dinghy is patently insane.
What was her thought? Was she gonna jump to it?
Yes.
That's the
She's
stupidest.
Jump off the yacht onto the dinghy.
And obviously, look, she's got a lot of adrenaline going.
Tons
She's
of adrenaline.
completely derailed.
She's melted down.
But just one of the all-time worst decisions you've ever seen made on a boat.
None of her bearings about her. And yeah.
The derpy death.
Derpy death falls down. I think dings the railing of the dinghy. Like
she hits her head on the side of it on the way down.
Ross, this whole time, I'm like, no, she's not going to die. She doesn't have any reason to die here. The other thing that she can do is just stay on the yacht
and wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to figure this out. All yachts have a comm system up there on the top where the captain has to be able to communicate with the shore. There's a bunch of things that you can do here.
Yeah.
Everybody in this boat is gone now. You've either killed them or they've jumped off of it.
Right.
Like you're good. You're good.
She panicked, man.
But it's just it's a panic moment. It's a Tanya moment. And that was. But the whole time I'm like, nah, she'll be all right. She's gonna die. And then she clanks on the dinghy, and I'm like, oh,
doink.
They're doing it.
Yeah, full blown death, and the shot of her body, her face very close up, floating through the water as the Italian opera music starts playing in the background. And really, I guess since Madame Butterfly, we should have known.
Yeah,
we should have known.
The signs were all there,
but I didn't want to let go, man.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and so here's where we arrive. This was the one thing that for me I rubbed on it a little bit. Mike White, I feel like he taught us with season 1 that he was going to be subversive, and that all of our theorizing and all of our hours spent thinking about it and online and on Reddit and on TikTok and in the comments section and podcasting and all of that nonsense was like all going to be like chasing down a misdirect.
Right.
And that he was actually smarter than us, and the story was something a little different that you didn't totally see coming.
Yeah.
So I did feel that the only moment that I felt a slight disappointment is actually on the phone call with Porsha, where she is piecing it all together. And she's like, the prenup, Greg, Quentin, they're going to kill me. And I was like, all right, it felt a little too convoluted, obvious, whatever you want to call it. And I also just, we're only a day after the episode, so maybe I'll have had more time to digest it when we get to later in the week and take hotline calls. But like, what was it all? Like, why did they need to take her to the Palazzo? Like, it just seemed like a very labored process to get into the position where they could then get her on a dinghy so that they could whack her. Like, it just seems like there would have been an easier way.
I think that's a fair question.
I guess they wanted maybe the story of it all, like, so that there's an explanation.
I just realized part of it. They needed all those witnesses at the party to see her having a blast. These guys wouldn't kill her. They were like best friends. They've been hanging out for days or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think it was about the setup. And to think back to Greg's last, hurrah with her, he takes her out on this last, perfect Italian dream day where she gets to be Monica Vitti on the Vespa. And there was definitely something to all that setup that I think they were going to try to utilize for their story of what happened after the fact, right?
Yeah.
But it did make sense that if they get a divorce, Greg doesn't get any of the money.
Right.
But if she dies, he obviously does. And the other question that came into play for me there was like, do we think Quentin and Greg have done this before? He has had 3 other wives prior to this one. Maybe they've been hustling with each other ever since they did meet back on the Dude Ranch or whatever Quentin says.
Yeah.
Where in his story with Tanya, he ends up being heartbroken because the guy's a heterosexual. Well, maybe he wasn't, right? Maybe that part of the story was bullshit.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
We don't know.
We
may never know.
Piece we don't know. Yeah.
But in the end, I think one of the interesting questions that we'll have to discuss further on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles later in the week is, do we think Greg gets any money? And my initial leaning right now is absolutely not. How the fuck would this investigation that is clearly unfolding as the episode comes to an end not result in major foul play questions and whether or not this guy had his wife set up.
Yeah.
Right? If they go back and search the Palazzo, they're finding the photo of Greg and Quentin.
Right,
And damn sure any sane, normal IQ'd person is not going to look at that photo and go, well, it could be a guy named Steve.
So one of the things that I was thinking about is because obviously Jennifer Coolidge won't carry on into season 3, will we get like a string type effect where like a different character carries on into season 3? Like, for as long as Mike White keeps this show going, will he kind of transfer one over to
And
the
I have
next,
a lot to say about this.
but never the same one. And
Yeah.
so the obvious one for me when we were discussing this after the episode as a possibility, I was like, well, see, like if you're going to put one person in, it'd be Porsha, right?
Portia's this. That's what my wife said.
You'd
but,
carry Porsha over.
but she's broke. What the fuck is she gonna do?
Well, maybe she'll play Alby for $50,000. I don't know.
No, that's possible.
But she's the one also. She's got the most wanderlust, I think. She's the one. We're going to Asia next, so that's a really kind of like out there, obscure place where you might go to find yourself or do something or explore Eastern religion and medicine or some stuff like that. So I could see it making sense. And then if you carry her over, then you still have the tie to the Greg Tanya fallout as well. So you could try to include that as some type of tertiary story or backdrop for something that she's experiencing or dealing with. But he might not do any of that. So.
My initial take is he doesn't carry any of these characters over. That we get all new characters because it gets too messy too quickly. The one line Mike White drops after the episode that did make me curious is he says something about, did Greg get the money? We may have to wait and find out, right? And I don't think he's made the decision either, Mike White.
Oh, I don't think so either. No.
But as I sat there and thought through it for like an hour and a half after the episode ended on Sunday night, I came to the conclusion that it would make the most sense for him to have a clean slate, no tie to any of these people, and not have to worry about the story you've written already. But again, I got a lot to say about this that we'll get into on patreon.com/oystersclamscockles later in the week. So Tanya goes down. Daphne discovers her body the next morning. We see all the bodies being pulled out of the water, obviously. We get to the airport, the Degrasso men checking out the same Italian babe. Then Porsha and Alby meet up one last time, and they exchange numbers, and they have the great lines where she's like, or he says, what happened with the guy? And she goes, oh, he was deranged.
He's deranged.
She's like, what about your girl? And he says, she played me. Just directly, almost shamelessly, I would note. And they exchange numbers, and the actress who plays Porsha, whose name
Haley
is
Lou Richardson.
Yeah, Haley Lou Richardson. She put up on her Instagram a photo of Alby and Porsha and a baby. I think one of the babies from the FaceTime, and said like Alby and Porsha season 3, like almost as a joke that confirms to me that it won't be them.
Right.
Because otherwise Mike White would have been like, take that down immediately. But yeah, I love the little ending between them where Porsha ends up seeing like, I should have gone with the nice guy.
Right. Yes. And
I'll do nice guy in air quotes too, because I still don't like Alby.
So I want to touch on that. Another thing that I liked about this was it was a reminder that essentially when they split apart is when everything flies off the rails.
Yes. Yeah.
Those two deciding to go explore other options essentially is kind of what like throws everything off course. Not that it's not headed that direction already, but I thought it was kind of a cool callback to like, when they split up and start going off and doing their own thing is when everything gets out of hand. And so them kind of like shaking off the dust from insane experiences and being like, maybe this would be just fine. And that's good. And that's good.
I don't need anything else.
Don't need anything too exciting, too outlandish, too adventurous. I thought that was fun. But I wondered what the connection was, or the reason that I came to the conclusion for the Degrasso connection, just being that all of these guys are easily distracted and manipulated and like essentially controlled by their sexual desires, is because I don't know if Alby's a bad guy or not. I don't think he is a bad guy. You're not a bad like
definitely a mark, maybe not a bad guy.
Right, definitely a mark, but wanting to save, quote unquote, save Lucia from this life, from her pimp, whatever. Like it's Mark behavior, but it's like it has a
presumptuous at worst, right?
Right.
He assumes that she needs saving and that she needs help, but that doesn't necessarily make him a piece of shit in the way that like you look at his dad. Because look, he's not married. He's a young guy. He's still figuring out life. Maybe an idiot, but You're right. I don't think it's fair to necessarily classify him as bad. He just had so many of these like wannabe white knight, feminist lines throughout the course of the season that make me kind of like cringe. But in the end, I hope this was a hard lesson learned for him.
Right.
Because he got taken for 50,000 euros in a 3-day span, just because the Italian hooker showed him attention, right? Which is not good. It doesn't. It definitely is it's a gigantic red flag
that he's got some level of issues, right?
And I think another one of the points here is that as he continues, he will deal with these same issues that his dad and grandfather have, the same demons at the very least that they've dealt with. Maybe they look a little bit different, but like the apple doesn't fall from the tree, far from the tree, essentially.
And then on the flip side, Porsha, she thought that adventure and this sexy guy with a British accent and a cowabunga tattoo on his neck, that was the answer. And her lesson obviously is like, okay, well, sometimes maybe the sexier option isn't necessarily best.
Yeah.
Right. So, the Spillers and...
But I really liked that ending for them too.
Yeah. The Spillers are all lovey-dovey in the airport like they failed to be the entire vacation, which I thought was they're all cuddled up with each other. Yeah. And in the end, like I said, they needed a little of the Sullivans in them, literally and figuratively. And I mean, I thought you hit the nail on the head 4 podcasts ago, probably, when you said, like, look, both of these couples could probably learn something from one another, right? Unfortunately, I don't think the Sullivans are learning anything from anyone. They're too far gone, and I don't think just because they survived this vacation that their relationship is in a good place or that they'll survive the long haul.
I think that's right, too.
So we have Sam Cooke's "The Best Things in Life Are Free" song starts playing, and we see Mia and Lucia skipping through the streets of Sicily together, and Lucia hugs Alessio, who was just a doorman at another hotel, not her pimp, obviously. And that was it, man. We went through a lot in 7 episodes. That was quite the experience. It will be probably weeks before I've fully absorbed all of it. And I'll say this, never has there been a season of television that was more ripe for rewatching than season 2 of The White Lotus? Because I was thinking back to so many different scenes where I was like, holy shit, that's going to hit completely differently. Oh my God, that was a huge clue that I want to go back and read more into. Like, there's so many of them, and I can't wait to do it one day.
Yeah, what I'll save for Thursday is just the more talk about the overall themes of this episode, the wants, the desires of all of these different people and how they kind of like manifested and played out. The one thing that I did want to note on this podcast is I thought it was a nice flip. I feel like this was probably intentional, but at the end of season 1, the winners are essentially the upper class, the money havers.
Right.
They all go back to their normal privileged lives. The losers are the hotel manager, played by Murray Bartlett, who dies, the hotel employee who gets arrested.
Right.
Right, like
for stealing the necklace
or
whatever.
Stealing the necklace, and then he's going to go off to jail, and our young girl who's kind of caught in between the two sides, like has to make a play for her own privilege, right, to go back to her own life rather than try to do something noble there. And so it felt like that flipped because Mia and Lucia are very clear winners here. Valentina is a winner at the end of all of this. So like the kind of the downstairs essentially are the ones that are on the come up here, and the people with the money, Alby, Tanya, like they're the ones that have kind of even Cam and Daphne, who one of them's got a black eye, the other is like pushing down all of this bad information.
Well, they both cheated on each other on this trip. Yeah.
So it felt like the pendulum kind of swung the other way for the end of this season, where the winners and losers were kind of flipped.
Absolutely. I have a lot more to say about the themes of the 2 seasons we've seen, season 1 and season 2, the differences, what Mike White says we're going to be doing with season 3, heading east, about the MVP of this season, the LVP, least valuable player of this season, I'll get into on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles as well. It's going to be a really fun episode on Thursday this week, Barrett. I'm looking forward to it. Again, thank you to everybody in the Crustacean Nation and the Mollusk Militia for supporting our podcast by going to patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles and signing up so you can get even more OCC. Barrett and I will be back covering The Last of Us, which starts January 15th on HBO Max. It's a new, all I'll say is it's a zombie apocalyptic style TV show based on one of the best-selling and I would argue best video games ever made, which is typically not a good thing.
Yep.
So it's going to be something in entertainment, movies, or TV being based on a video game very rarely pays off. So it will be interesting to see how HBO Max handles this. I will say the storytelling in The Last of Us is very prime to be turned into a TV show. Super excited for it. Barrett and I will be covering The Last of Us episode by episode, the way we did with The White Lotus, the way we do with House of the Dragon, the way we did with Game of Thrones. Between now and then, here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you're listening, I will be doing some random episodes. One on The Rings of Power, sharing all my takes about Season 1, maybe one on 1899 from the makers of Dark. I watched Season 1 of that. Perhaps Barrett and I discussing Andor Season 1 as well. We will see what we can make time for during the holiday season, but there will for sure be some stuff. So stay subscribed on YouTube, stay following on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the social media platforms so that Barrett and I can keep you informed when we have new podcasts dropping. And then for all of you listening that are already on HBO, come back January 15th. The Last of Us premieres, and we will be doing our podcast shortly thereafter, starting the breakdowns for HBO's next big release, if you're not counting His Dark Materials Season 3, which I'm not. Go to bolenmedia.com/shop to get yourself some OCC merch. Follow us on TikTok at Oysters, Clams, and Cockles, at Clams and Cockles on Twitter, Oysters, Clams, Cockles on Instagram. Mr. Dudley can be followed at Barrett Dudley on Twitter and Instagram, at WR Bolen on Twitter and Instagram. Every episode of our show is available on YouTube for you to watch at youtube.com /at Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. And patreon.com/Oysters, Clams, Cockles later this week for even more Season 2 finale talk with hotline calls from our listeners driving the discussion. Be there or be square. Until next time, Clam Fam.